Hey everybody, welcome to What's the Function. I'm your host, John Firth, and once again I'm joined by the illustrious Brian Dagan.
Illustrious, haven't heard that one. Hello everyone.
So, we've been working on this rural healthcare program for a long time, 6 months, and we haven't talked about it, but then again we haven't really talked about much because we've been really busy, and building this out from kind of scratch, right?
Yep.
You want to talk about not how we got involved, because that's a whole long story and a lot of people, but maybe how we based our original assessment, what this assessment is trying to accomplish, and more so, I think it's a lot of education here, especially for these rural communities. So why don't we start with, how did we build this assessment?
Yep. We were tasked to run through this with Microsoft in order to improve the security posture of rural hospitals. Kind of a White House initiative trying to make sure that our healthcare security was up to snuff. And effectively, we needed a good baseline to base our questionnaire off of. It needs to be a quick tabletop assessment to understand where they're at.
Yeah.
And what I found to be a very good candidate was one that came out back in, I believe it was April of 2023 or maybe 2024 this year.
Yeah, it was very recent. It was perfect timing.
It?
It was perfect timing. It was serendipitous that it had recently came out.
Yep. HHS Health and Human Services put out the Cybersecurity Performance Goals, CPGs, which is yo dog, I have a standard on a standard for you type thing. But they basically boiled down a lot of the HIPAA compliance requirements into a prioritized checklist of 10 essential controls and 10 enhanced controls that anybody can take, particularly in the healthcare sector, to improve their security posture.
Yeah, and I want to clue in on something you just said, particularly in the healthcare sector, but most of, especially on the basic controls, these are things that we would do for any of our clients. Matter of fact, most of the controls that are in there are part of our standard protect or safeguard package.
Yeah. And
if they weren't, then they've kind of been slowly being added into it as we continue to, build out those other product lines that we have going.
Yep.
We've got to talk to a lot of hospitals. I think the last I looked, it was 124 hospitals as of this week that we have helped.
Mm-hmm.
That's a crazy number, given that we just started this really we started ramping up in July. So, you can do the math, take it across 12 weeks and divide it out. That's almost 10 a week that we've been working on.
Yep.
And I do think that we've had some real world aha moments with clients. I think that, in some cases people were way above and beyond what we expected for the baseline. And then in some cases, not.
Yeah.
And where I really want to focus today is not the great cases that are out there, but some of the cases that aren't great in ways that we're helping them.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of hurt my soul slightly because a few of these have been therapy sessions.
Yeah.
They're understaffed, they're under-resourced, and they're trying to make the best of a bad situation. And in many cases, the hospital may be, on the verge of bankruptcy or on the verge of closing.
Yeah.
Several of these I've looked up right beforehand to not only do some initial reconnaissance work to help guide questions, but also understand, what's in the news about this particular hospital. And they're having a hard time. So what we wanted to do was look at what you would typically consider to be the best way to improve your security posture. And for many hospitals, this tends to be compliance driven.
Mm-hmm.
They're given a compliance requirement. Software vendor A, B, or C shows up and says, hey, I have just the thing for you. And before you know it, you have a layer cake of disconnected solutions that aren't talking to each other, that are costing you an arm and a leg in terms of licensing, and you really lose the holistic visibility of a modern XDR.
And that was, I think, the biggest shock to me, I guess, is where the money is being placed. People are doing security efforts in these hospitals.
Absolutely.
They are trying to make it better. So, I don't want anybody to get that twisted up.
Yeah.
They're trying. But we're also talking about nonprofit hospitals in rural communities across America. And that's, as anybody who's listening knows, healthcare in America is already a crazy topic, but when we're talking about rural communities, you might not have another healthcare facility for dozens of miles.
Yeah.
In some cases more than that. And so just getting services is hard, but then knowing what services to pick is even harder because you're trying to put out fires and make sure that you hit these compliance guidelines and these requirements that the federal government's putting down and all of these different things.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. And, I know you don't fault them, neither do I.
Nope.
For just coming in and saying, hey, this is going to fix my problem at this moment so I can move on to the next fire. Mm-hmm. And what I've been very impressed with our team, specifically you leading this, is that we've been able to go in and really push that holistic solution and say, we realize that you're using something for EDR. We realize that you're using something for anti-phishing, anti-spoofing, and testing that. We know that you're using something for this or that, and none of them are talking to each other.
Yeah.
Or if they are, it's very disconnected, which you touched on. Mm-hmm. And I think that us being able to just go in there and say, there is a solution. Yep. It's not that difficult, and we can go through and help you through this. And we have with, I think, about 10 hospitals so far.
Yeah.
We've actually dove in, gone through, done audits, coming out the other side, and really increasing their security, but also increasing the visibility mm-hmm. of that landscape, that threat landscape that we talk so much about.
Yep. And to be clear, there's still a lot of legacy in these hospitals. You still might be running your EHR, EMR on site. You still have the on-prem Active Directory. You still have a fleet of servers, and some of them you're pretty sure what they do, and some of them were, stood up 8 years ago by a guy who left, 7 years ago. So it's a staged step toward mm-hmm. Cloud adoption in many cases, and it's an entire mindset shift. If you're used to buying CALs, if you're used to spinning up servers, if you're used to managing networks, being told that, hey, let's not spin up another server. Let's use our direct link to Azure, put it up there. Let's right-size the machine. Let's figure out how to do storage and backup replication to different zones. All of these things are just new topics for people, mm-hmm. and they really do need a trusted partner who have done this rodeo 1,000 times to help them with it.
And another thing that we can kind of talk about on that same thing is it is a literal IT person in a lot of cases. Or sometimes not even an IT person. Sometimes we get, this is the most technical millennial on staff, right?
Like half a nurse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of times the IT person is having to recruit nurses and additional folks on staff to help them.
Yeah.
With these rollouts, help them with the modernization efforts that they're trying to undertake.
And we here at FSi, we've talked about this before on many other episodes of the podcast, but we're certified. We are, we go take our exams, we go to conferences, we pay attention to the technology, we're constantly learning, and that's a big thing here at FSi. But when it's not your job to constantly be learning, to constantly learn the new technology, to be on the bleeding edge so everybody else gets to be on the cutting edge, that's a problem, because now you have somebody whose primary role is healthcare, and then their secondary role is IT. And as we know, jack of all trades, master of none. Still better than one, mm-hmm. but it's not what we want in these situations. We don't want to have to, take from one to give to another. And it's unfortunately that we keep seeing that. Yep. Or we see not nearly enough IT staff. I know we talked to somebody last week, and it was one person, and they had 500 staff members there.
Yeah.
And when you talk to those people, it hurts your soul a little bit, because you're like, I couldn't imagine not having I have a great team that I get to work here with at FSi.
Agree.
And with that team, I get to rely on them, and they get to rely on me. And that's a wonderful thing that we have. But to be stuck in an environment where not only do you not have the camaraderie of a team, but you don't have the know-how or the guidance or the senior leadership to be able to come down and say, we shouldn't do this, or we should do this. Mm-hmm. That puts that person in not an impossible situation, but a very difficult situation.
Yep.
And especially when they're the ones having to make some of these technology choices.
And, the expression, you never get fired for aiming for the top right Gartner coordinator and throwing a dart. And if that happens to be the sales guy who happened to call you that mm-hmm. day, maybe they hit you in a vulnerable moment, and you say, okay, well, Sophos, your XDR looks great. Let's use that.
Yep.
And before you know it, you're very well down that road in a product that is not necessarily transferable skills-wise or technology-wise with the stack that mm-hmm. you're already paying licensing for.
Yeah. And then, I guess, last but not least, the licensing stack. Now, there a lot of these hospitals that we're working with are nonprofits, which is a wonderful thing because Microsoft has a great charitable donation program where, I mean, it is hard to find someone else in the industry that provides that level of funding for nonprofits. I mean, in most cases, it's 70 to 75% off the license, which is just a tremendous discount.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky enough to work with Microsoft to be able to get some of these hugely discounted licenses, not only in the environment, but turned on and activated and doing the things with them.
Yeah.
So with that one thing that I just said, I want to dive into licensing for nonprofits and why it's so important to go check your nonprofit status.
Please, please, please. That's the number one thing that we ask toward the end of it is what licenses are you in right now? Are you business premium? You under the 300 seat count? Are you an e-license? And are you nonprofit?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times I'm not sure. We're kind of reorganizing. We're kind of reworking where all the entities connect to each other. And we have this nonprofit. Put your licensing in the nonprofit bucket.
Yes.
Because you can't walk into a car dealership and ask for 70% off of a car.
No.
But you can get a very, very powerful set of licenses that give you the entire security suite and the entire connected vision of identity, device, and data for cheap.
Yeah. Very, very, very inexpensive. Yep. Very inexpensive. And with those licenses, if you do have them and you are going through nonprofit and you've done all of those check boxes, you still need to turn on the features.
Yeah.
And you and I have seen in recent history where they're paying for the license, they have the license, they have everything that they need to have a very great, secure environment.
Yep.
And, they just didn't activate it. Or, we wanted to pause for a moment.
Yep.
Attackers don't pause. Like, just because you're having a bad day, the attacker's not also going to have a bad day. They're going to give you a bad day.
Yeah.
So, just turn on those features. And if you need somebody to turn on those features, of course, there's plenty of awesome partners out there like FSi. We do it, but there's tons of partners. Have it turned on. Ask your MSP to turn on some of these baseline features. Even if you don't have something like our safeguard, which we've gone through and we've gone through all the best practices and all the baselines, and we've built additional features on top of all of the basic stuff that's out there. Turn on the basics.
Yeah. Well, I would also caution that, it does take a certain degree of expertise, and DLP is the first foot gun worthy method I can think of, where it seems readily apparent that, I should turn on encryption for this type of data for email. Done. But before you know it, you may have applied a legacy policy using an older method that's being deprecated. You may not fully understand the impact of to the people who are receiving the message from you and what their end user experience is like. And if you go changing the label taxonomy later on, you may break some things. You may not be able to open things that were sent at a prior time. So, I would definitely urge caution and urge folks to reach out to trusted resources, whoever they may be, any Microsoft partner, but anybody who has the expertise and the knowledge of the foot guns.
Yes.
It's not as foot gunny in many other parts of Microsoft, but that's the first one that comes to mind for sure.
Yeah, I think that when I think of some baselines that you can go in and turn on, conditional access policy for multi-factor authentication for every single user. That's one that's built in default, literally enable. Microsoft force enabled everybody to do the one for administrators, but they're not enforcing users. And yes, we don't want to compromise admin account, but we also don't want compromised user accounts.
Yeah. I have seen the per user MFA enforcement on the classic MFA though, and the foot gun there. I just said there weren't that many, but here I go again. The foot gun there is you're implementing a method that is not compatible with modern authentication methods based conditional access policies, and you're going to have to flop it again in September of next year.
Yeah,
because they are deprecating the old require multi-factor authentication checkbox.
Yes,
so you need to be ready for that, and particularly if you're working with partners like us. We've cut over to modern authentication methods in-house. And by the way, we're full cloud. No more servers.
No servers.
Yes!
Not even for our ticketing system. Not even for... I think I put out an episode 2 weeks ago about MSP 2.0, And like, that was it. We literally just crushed everything. There is no more legacy infrastructure, no cloud infrastructure as far as servers go, no cloud networking as far as like, I mean, like, we've really just like gutted it.
And let me say, I do appreciate you letting me be the one who pushed the final shutdown button on those. It meant a lot.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to kill them, but I knew you'd get more joy out of it.
I do. Much joy. Sparks much joy.
But I think that working with a partner that knows,
Mm-hmm.
and these are also things that you can look at, right? Like, Microsoft has opened up pretty much every Learn article out there.
Yeah.
It's a lot to read, as you know.
It's a lot to read, and it jumps all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, there's an incident response article that I wrote recently
Yeah.
that's based on a set of 4 Microsoft Learn articles. And in a couple places, the advice conflicts, and so I've had to deconflict that and boil it down. And I was just talking to one of our service desk guys, and he said, "Yeah, it's the second time I've run it this week. Appreciate you doing that." So yeah, it takes time to not only know where the resources are, but also digest them, understand why you're doing the things that you're doing, and make it repeatable.
Yeah. And I think with rural healthcare, that looping back to the initial topic, that's what we're doing.
100%.
We're putting in a repeatable process. We're showing how security can be enabled for an entire industry, that we can protect a ton of nonprofits that are doing, I mean, this isn't good work. This is literally life-saving work that we're talking about here. And I couldn't be happier to be a part of that mission.
And just to be clear, we have to acknowledge the classic infrastructure that's on site. And just because we're cloud only doesn't mean we're not going to support the on-prem infrastructure, but we are going to recommend additional compensating controls like Defender on all the servers, particularly any Defender workloads on databases and things like that, as well as Defender for Identity. Because, I mean, if you're hybridized, you got to watch the identities on-prem as well. Active Directory was built how long ago? So, there's a lot of little gremlins in there that you need to keep an eye out for from a security angle for sure.
Yeah. And I look forward for us to keep on doing this for more hospitals. And I think that we are. Well, I know we are. Yeah. And, it's a good mission. I want to keep it up, but it also has made us a little bit more robust, I think, in our security practice and given us more information than we would have ever had before, specifically in healthcare, but really, like I said, it transcends healthcare.
And into nonprofits. And it's tremendously helpful to have the perspective, not only of the professionals that we've been talking to at these hospitals, but to understand their struggles a little bit better and how we can adapt to better help them.
There's a lot there. Yeah. But thanks for joining me today. I think we're going to talk soon about some other fun stuff. So I look forward to having you back on the show. Thanks again, Brian.
Yep. See you in the same shirt shortly.
See you soon.